Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone, thank you for coming. Let's see, my name's Mark Reinhold. I'm the guy in the middle, but I'm not sitting in the middle. Maybe we should have sat in order. Oh well, never mind, that would make it too easy. So this is Ask the Java Architects. This is a Q&A session. I've written many slide decks in my life. This is my very shortest one. I have to show you this. Don't believe anything we're about to say. And then I'll show you this, which is the hashtag if you're feeling shy or if you're standing out in the hallway or something. You're welcome to tweet on Twitter with this hashtag, and I'll look at that occasionally as an additional source of questions. So I'm Mark. I'm joined here by 4 of my colleagues who will now introduce themselves briefly. What's your name? What do you do?
My name is David Sims. I have a couple of hats. I work in the hotspot runtime system as an engineer. I also lead the day-to-day operations for Project Valhalla, and I happen to manage the Stockholm engineering office.
My name is Jesper Bjrnsson. I'm also in the hotspot team, doing some security issues, security maintenance maybe, and doing some gatekeeping for the JDK integrations, stuff like that. Also trying to look at the developer processes that we are using and trying to spread the information throughout the open community.
Alan Bateman. I'm in the Java team in Oracle as well. I'm mostly working on libraries, OpenJDK, and I'm spending most of my time at the moment working on Project Loom.
Mm-hmm. Hi, my name is Klaus. I work as a performance engineer, and I try to win the record of who has run Hello World the most times. Yeah, open up for the floor.
Someone has to start, so it will be me this time. When you look for community support, so basically we as a company work with Java, we open sourced our performance test tool, and there's a lot of Java code, and it runs on high performance conditions. What would you like to do to help you? Shall we run this with every JDK and give you differences, or basically complain about things? And so what would be the best approach?
Okay, I'll start. So I've worked on the JDK for a long, long time, and the most valuable way that anyone can actually contribute is by testing the early access build and finding regressions, bugs, and reporting them in a timely manner. It's really, really annoying when you actually release a JDK version, and then 6 months later, a year later, someone reports a bug. If they'd reported it and had been testing the builds as we put the feature or the change or the bug fix or whatever it is in, and we're testing it in a timely manner, that would be so much valuable. So if you've got test suites, if you have benchmarks, if you can actually give feedback to any of the new APIs or features that are going in, I think that is so valuable.
And on the screen is where you can get early access builds for a variety of projects, including JDK 15, JDK 14, and Loom, and other exciting things.
Okay. Yes, I have a question about the garbage collector. Is there a theoretical limit on how long a garbage collection can last? And why I'm asking this, we have discovered that sometimes we have like a health check system, and we sometimes notice that the health check thread is delayed its execution because of a large garbage collection. So, and we are still on Java 8, I can add. So, okay.
That's the problem right there.
So that's the question.
So a theoretical limit for the garbage collection pause, yes, there is. I mean, during a garbage collection pause, the live garbage should be compacted into a memory area, basically. That's what the garbage collector do, to be able to reclaim the free memory. So the time it takes to copy all live data would be a theoretical. Now, no garbage collection algorithm in hotspot would actually copy all live data during one pause. I mean, yeah, well, okay, some maybe major super duper full GC in serial and something like that. But I'm guessing that I'm going to assume you're not running serial. But obviously, yes, there is an upper limit. What the limit actually is depends on the garbage collection algorithm and how much live data you have in your program.
Well, to add to that, since the question is implicitly how do I get shorter pause times, then of course updating to the latest JDK is one way. Trying out G1 is one way, or CMS if you're on 8 still. It could be, there are lots of various different ways to tune. Run with a smaller heap if you're, if you would prefer shorter but more frequent pauses.
So I'll take the opportunity of this question to do the standard polling question. So this gentleman is running on Java 8. That's not a surprise, but we're all always interested in learning what releases are people running on. Now, a distinction that I think is important to make, and many polls never make this distinction, is: are you using a release of a given version to run an existing system, or are you using a release of a given version to develop something new? Because the answers to those two questions are fairly different. So I'd like to ask a quick series of questions by show of hands in the room. Let's see where things fall. How many people are using a version of Java earlier than 8 in production to run an existing system? Okay. How many people are using a version earlier than 8 to develop something new? Okay, good. How many people are using 8 in production? Yeah, pretty much everybody. How many people are using 8 to write something new? Fewer. That's encouraging. How many people are using 11 in production? All right, that's maybe a third. How many people are using 11 to write something new? Maybe a little more than a third. How many people are using 13 in production? 1, 2 brave souls. How many people are using 13 to write something new? Okay, maybe half a dozen brave souls. How many people are using 14 in production? It hasn't GA'd yet. Wise people. How many people are using 14 to write something new? Well, anybody using 15 in production? All right, thanks. That was interesting and encouraging. Good to see people moving past 8.
So maybe this is something that you would rather keep to yourselves, but...
Sorry, where are you? Thank you.
What do you see as like the biggest challenge for the JDK moving forward in like the foreseeable future?
Hipsters. Oh, I don't know. What do we see as the most challenging thing to move the JDK forward? Well, to getting people to upgrade, getting people to actually use the newest features. Yeah, that's hard, but finding the new and relevant thing that everyone will consider being a killer feature for something that is already as mature, stable, and performant as Java. I think that's a big challenge.
Yeah. So we have to keep Java. We have to keep Java moving forward and relevant for the next 20 years. And at the same time, we've got to keep all these dusty jars that have been developed for the last 20 years keep running. So I think a big challenge is actually trying to move it forward, keep it modernized, keeping up with the trends, and at the same time, keeping all this other stuff going and all the compatibility. I think that's a huge challenge to for the next 20 years.
I think just, on top of your point that you made there, Alan, keeping people contributing back, if it's, feedback for early access or just caring about features, keeping the audience.
Speak from the side. Okay. Where do you see Java moving in the next 5 and 10 years? Yeah, where do you see Java going in 5 and 10 years? What could be the next killer features?
So I was in a talk with Shrat this morning about Java Futures, so I thought I'd just start with that point. And I think there are a couple of large and exciting projects that are on their way, in full swing development. Some are arriving earlier than others. The really cool ones I like are Loom, basically to address multi-core utilization without having to pull your hair out over reactive frameworks. My personal favorite is my project, Valhalla, but sure, I've talked about it a bit before. There are plenty of new candy features coming in from Amber, and I just see that's like a pipeline of new, just fine-tune the language, take away or add developer efficiency features. Panama is a great thing. ZGC is obviously a thing that's already in there now, and it's like, for us, it's kind of opened our eyes. What can you do with garbage collection? I would never guess that we would get like sub-millisecond pauses. So we kind of wonder what else is in store for the future in that technology space.
Well, I'd like to ask a question back. Where do you want us to be in 5 or 10 years? It's open source.
Yeah, so I'm spending most of my time working on Project Loom and adding virtual threads to the platform. And you talked about 5 or 10 years time frame. We better be done by then. I would hope that's a killer feature. I would hope that will actually avoid newer developers to have to go over the pain of actually having to use very, very complicated asynchronous type APIs. I would hope that it actually will enable a lot of the existing tools like debuggers and profilers and things like that to work sanely in a highly scalable application. So I think that's I would hope that's a killer feature. In addition, David mentioned about Project Panama. If we do that one right, then I would hope that a lot of the energy that's going into developing machine learning and AI today we'll be able to get that onto the Java platform as it is on Python today. I think that would be actually really, really good, because I think the VM could do a really, really good job there.
So my colleagues have mentioned features that are in the pipeline right now, and one thing to say about the pipeline is it is the richest that it has ever been. We have so much stuff going on, and the new 6-month release cadence allows us to deliver things every 6 months rather than every 3 or 5 or 7 years or whatever. So it's a pretty exciting time for Java, we think. Additionally, I think it's worth mentioning there's a recipe for figuring out what we do next. The sort of meta plan is how do we evolve Java? It's not a matter of just looking at what's popular and copying stuff from C# or Scala or whatever. It's actually much more intentional than that. Basically, for 25 years, Java's been driven by driving towards two goals that we just keep driving towards. One is improving developer productivity, and the other is improving program performance. Those two things pretty much drive all that we do, and we're pursuing those goals in the context of a world that's changing all the time, right? There are different programming styles, different programming problem domains come in and out of fashion. Today machine learning is a thing. 25 years ago, it was AI that you studied when you were in undergrad and then forgot about. Today, the hardware is very different than it was 25 years ago. Today, taking a cache miss in the third level cache of your processor can cost you thousands and thousands of instructions. In 1995, it cost you maybe 100. That makes for very different trade-offs in high-performance program design. So beyond the projects that we've mentioned, we're already doing some early thinking about, for example, to take machine learning. There's a critical operation in many machine learning algorithms called automatic differentiation, which requires having a representation of your code that can be manipulated by a library, in a way that's more intimate than just, say, taking a lambda and invoking it. The library actually takes your code and transforms it into something new. And for that, we probably need something called expression trees, and so we're starting to think about that, and that is something that will almost certainly not be done in the next 3 years, but we'd definitely like it to be done in the next 5 to 10.
When one listens to the problems Valhalla and Loom might have to stay compatible and basically don't break old jars, wouldn't it make sense at a certain point in time to say, hey, if you still own code that's pre-11 maybe, please stay on 11, and we have to break at a certain point in time and say, to really move Java forward, we have to basically draw a line here and say, the new stuff is beyond the line and the old stuff is before the line? Is this an idea? Just because it seems to be so complicated often to implement something new. I understand this moving forward compatibility thing, that we have to think carefully about stuff, but often it seems to be hard to, make something work and keep the 20-year-old stuff still working.
No, that's a fair point, but I think it's the siren song of the green field, right? Yeah, it would be great. Could we just start over? It's like all those mistakes that we and our predecessors made 20 years ago. Serialization. Oh crap! Let's not do that again. AWT. Yeah, that was a big mistake. Yeah, you just get rid of it. It is really tempting, and many of us occasionally while away the hours fantasizing. Oh, what would we do if we had a blank slate? The problem is that the huge value to the Java ecosystem is having a platform that remains relevant and can run old systems. So I think we have to take a more gradualist approach. Now, for many years, we took a very hard line on compatibility in terms of running old code. As many of you have probably noticed, we chose in 9 intentionally to break some things. And we did that with a lot of thought and a lot of input and feedback, and we did break some things, and we knew we were going to break some things, and we tried to tell as many people as we could ahead of time, here's what's going to break, here's what you need to do to get around it. And the things we broke, it was mainly a matter of people who had been using JDK internal APIs for 23 years, even though we had been telling them for 25 years don't do that. Because that had gone on for so long, some of those things are still there because we don't have replacements for them yet. But once we do, they will finally completely go away. So we have, in the recent past, taken a more aggressive yet hopefully still thoughtful attitude about drawing a line. But it's kind of a translucent line, right? And that's why getting from Java 8 to Java 11 is more work for many people, because there are those kinds of dependencies. And if you own an application, you might not even know that you have them until you try to move to 11. because you've got, you're using some library from central that uses some library from central that uses some library from central that uses some method in unsafe that no longer exists. And that's just something you won't find out until you try to move past 8.
Yeah, just a quick commercial break, and just mention that the JDK has a couple of tools to help do static analysis on your application and your libraries and everything that's on your class path. 2 tools to mention are JDEPS, which is a static analyzer to look at what it depends on. That'll actually report if any static dependencies on internal APIs. And then there's another tool that, by the way, JDEPS actually was in JDK 8. So for most of the room that put their hand up, you've actually already got the tool. It's been improved in recent versions, but it started off in 8. The other tool is JDEPR scan, which is relatively new, and that allows you to actually identify usages of deprecated methods. Or deprecated elements and classes, and in addition, there's a new form of deprecation for anyone that's been following what's going on. There is things just don't get deprecated and then removed. There is a deprecated for removal since 9, and the JDEPR scan can actually help you identify those as well. So they could be useful for. It's not like we ever remove anything without many releases or years of notice.
Specific to Valhalla, I remember sitting in this conference 2 years ago, and we were making suggestions about we want to do this or that, and people were gladly pointing out that you'll break our libraries, and some of the libraries we have at this point in the industry, the author is dead, and there is literally no one that really cares about taking care of this. So we definitely think it's important. Another thing is, again, related to Valhalla, a lot of the things that we talk about, yes, we have issues with compatibility, but there are also trade-offs when it comes to performance. If we're looking at features that were never that highly performant, like synchronized blocks, we may feel that it might be worth to give a little bit of performance away and gain it in a different area. So all is not lost when it comes to workarounds for compatibility. A third point I would raise, some of you are a little bit older like I am. How many people have used Netscape 4? How many of you used Netscape 5? Right, that's when they did that massive rewrite and it didn't work out for them. And if we were to say, let's do a new VM from the start, how many years would that take? Yeah.
So the version naming and to be able to keep up, have you considered like year.version or something like that?
That was in fact the original proposal for the rapid cadence model. Was using last 2 digits of the year, followed by the digit of the month with a decimal point before it. This was soundly rejected by many. And so we now look more like a, I guess, Firefox. By the time I retire, we will have shipped, Java 148 or something. I don't know. Well, no, wait, I won't live that long.
So Mark used the word reject. He could have answered it by not saying anything, instead just lifting his shirt and showing you the scars from that proposal.
Hello. I have a question about the common fork join pool. And mainly, like probably a lot of other people, have seen the dot parallel that you can write in a stream and thought that it's magic performance dust that you can sprinkle on your application to make it magically faster. And obviously it isn't. But like the thoughts behind the common fork join pool, when you're supposed to use it, because to me, if you're using it, you'll get non-deterministic behavior in your application because it will depend on where you're running it, what else is running and using that fork join pool at the same time. And in combination with that, is there work being done to make it easier to use, create fork join pools from your own custom thread pools? Because right now it's a bit cumbersome to do.
I was not directly involved in the JSR that produced Lambda and the Streams API, but I remember a big lengthy thread on the Lambda dev where this was actually discussed in excruciating detail. So you're right, is that if a stream is parallel, the common pool, which is the fork join pool that is used for stream operations, is sized based on the number of cores. So if you've other things that are actually competing for the resources, then yes, you may see some unpredictable behavior, I think is the way you termed it. I'm not aware of any effort at the moment to revisit that conversation. Bring it up on the OpenJDK list or concurrency interest. I think more people will remember there all of the history on that.
I have a question related to JPackage. I used Java, the old Java packager before, and I relied on the user VM options, which were removed, and they have not come back in JPackage. And the user VM option, well, it was cumbersome and there was some troubles with it, but I can't see any replacement and I can't even see any possibility to implement it myself since I need to hook into the launcher.
Did anyone hear what he said? Sorry, would you just mind repeat the user, which option?
The user VM option, where you could make the launcher pick up some, for instance, the XMX option, and use that to launch the VM from your packaged application so that you could give the end user some option, some possibility, some mechanism to, to set the VM options, which you otherwise can't.
Bit of an attractive nuisance here. Do you remember this one, Mark?
I don't. Right, I thought that file was still in JPackage, but I'm not sure. Okay, well, I guess first question is, have you brought this feedback to the relevant mailing list? Core dev at OpenJDK. Did anybody answer you? Did anybody reply at all? Okay, that's unfortunate. Was this recently?
I know I asked twice with about something like 1 year in between.
Okay, could you please forward the emails to me and I will follow up. mark.reinhold@oracle.com.
Yeah, will do.
Yeah, so just one general point just around the JPackage tool is as you've been following, you'll see that it's not there isn't a one-to-one correspondence between what was the FX packager and the new JPackage tool. There's a lot of things that have been cleaned up. There's a lot of things that have been revisited with hindsight. I think the tool that we have now is a lot better and a lot saner. Works with modern versions of the runtime, fits with the Jlink story and producing custom runtime images, fits with modules and so on. None of that was there with the packager, the FX packager. In addition, the FX packager came from a world of JNLP applications, WebStart applications. Things have moved on from then. So it is it's in the same space, but it's a different tool. So a lot of things have been rewritten and revisited here. I don't know the full history on this one, but there's certainly some comfort issue. I remember there's some issues around overriding options, but I don't know the details because I'm not directly involved.
So I'm still coming across some old code bases with JNI libraries and with the new Panama project. Do you foresee that using Panama, you can use your old technical debt products in a more efficient way, and hence just extending your technical debt.
Okay, so JNI is not going away. Yeah, maybe some ways to revisit how it's launched or something to enable. I don't know, but a lot of the JDK libraries have native code to integrate with system calls. They're certainly going to take a long time before they're all replaced. Maybe some of them will never get replaced. So I don't think JNI is going away. If that's your part of your question.
I think the question was if Panama is making native code easier to use, so will that make your native code then stick around for longer, and is that a problem? I'm not sure. I guess you're right. I mean, any tool that we put in the hands of developers can be abused. And no, well-intended design of ours can, convince any persistent developer to keep latching onto bad code.
So I think the Pandavas in multiple different phases. I don't know whether you've looked at what's currently there. Okay, I see a shaking head. Yeah. So what's there at the moment is an incubating module with the foreign memory API. It's actually a really nice API for those that are actually dealing with memory that's off heap. If you've been using SunMISC on safe, then for accessing on off heap memory, then look at the API that's in 14. It's really nice. But in the future, when it eventually has the foreign function interface, then it'll just make it easier to be able to integrate with the libraries that have native bindings, the TensorFlows and all of those. I think that will actually be, it's tied into some of those mention of machine learning and things like that in some of the other questions earlier on, or some of the answers maybe. And I think it'll just make it a lot more performant and a lot easier to create bindings for those APIs.
Mike Dwigu on Twitter, hi Mike, asks, any progress on making UTF-8 the default platform encoding? This is not the first time Mike has asked this question. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things we would like to get to. But it is a change that we know is going to break some existing applications that assume that they're running in, whatever obscure Windows code page is, on whatever obscure system. So hopefully we'll get there. I can't say when.
Mike, are you there? He's somewhere watching this. So there's a draft JEP written, just need someone to run with it. There are issues, as Michael says, particularly with Windows on Asian locales, and that's an issue because customers are big companies in Japan and China sometimes are not keeping up and sometimes don't recognize these kind of changes. And if they've got a lot of files that are in the platform encoding, and there's a lot of different ones depending on what locale you're on, there's some compatibility concerns in there. But I really hope that someone will put time into this. We've actually written up, I think, a reasonable proposal that would actually get us there over a couple of releases and still provide the switches for compatibility, but it'll just take time.
And Mike, I think you do have an Oracle contributor agreement on file, so think about it.
Hello. I'm wondering about Java Web Start. I believe it was discontinued now in Java 11, but why was not the source code made available after that? I mean, you could have just open sourced it even if you discontinued it.
It is widely believed by many that open sourcing an existing body of code is an easy and inexpensive operation to do. That is not the case. For example, when Sun open sourced the JDK, we spent the better part of a year preparing for it. Both going through the code, working with the legal department to ensure that Sun had the rights to open source all of that code, which it turned out Sun didn't. For those of you who remember, the initial drops of JDK source code were incomplete. WebStart is another complex body of source code, obviously not as big as the JDK itself, but certainly non-trivial. It does contain code for which Oracle does not have the rights to open source it. It would require substantial effort, and our sense also is that WebStart is fading into the past. So it's still part of the Java 8 build you can get from Oracle. There is at least one, maybe two, open source implementations of it. At least one of them works or used to work because I used it for a long time. So it's fading into the past. It's following in the footsteps, I think, of web browser plugins, which were basically killed off by the browser makers. And those are now well in the past. They just don't exist anymore. I think WebStart was a nice model for a while, but nowadays apps are just delivered in different ways, and it's not as strongly needed. But I understand your pain if you miss it. Sorry.
So I was just wondering, the more that I see like news in regards like people using coding languages, Python is always gaining like a lot of force, and I think if in my reasoning, this is because Python is kind of easy and is being taught in universities as a, let's say, first program to learn, and I think it's just because of how easy it is. So I was wondering if you guys are actually paying enough significance on how easy is Java becoming for newcomers, and if this should be kind of part of the decision making that you guys foresee like for the future, since Java is getting a lot of upgrades when it comes to being performant, but maybe it will get stuck as C or Pascal someday.
Good question. So yes, we are deeply aware of the fact that Java is less approachable than other languages. It is a standard hurdle that the fact that you even have to explain to people, okay, just your first program, hello world, yeah, just trust me on this. Type public static void main. Don't ask me what they mean. just type that. And then parens, and then type system.out. Don't ask me what that means either. And then println hello world. It's like it's too much. We know it's too much. So we've been working for a few years now on one of the projects we mentioned earlier, Amber, which has the indirect goal of reducing boilerplate. So the direct goal is not reducing boilerplate, because if we took that goal, we might do something really distasteful and ugly. Rather, the goal of Amber is to slim the language down by finding simplifications in the language that allow you to express more easily what it is that you actually mean. And we find that if we do that, then the boilerplate tends to reduce. So for example, already Amber has produced switch expressions, which are now final in Java 14. That's instead of having a switch statement with breaks that you can fall through accidentally and things that you can forget to do in a default case that you might forget, you can write a switch expression which you use just as an expression, and if it's related to if what you're switching over is an enum type, for example, and the compiler can deduce that you've covered all the cases, then you don't need to include a default. But if it can't deduce that, it'll insist that you do so. So switch expressions are one thing that certainly helps. Another feature in 14 that's in as a preview feature is records. There are so many cases where all you want to declare is a simple plain old Java object. There's really nothing interesting about it. It doesn't need to encapsulate anything. It's just a bunch of data. And now you can just write record and a very simple declaration of its fields. You can customize it if you want, but this can replace just masses of boilerplate with one or two lines of code. Outside of the language, we're also simplifying some other things. A few releases back, I forget which one, we introduced a thing called launchable single file source code programs. Yeah. So if you have code in a file named foo.java, then you can just type Java, foo.java, and it'll just go compile it in memory and run it for you. So you don't have to remember, oh, Java C first and -d classes and where do you class path, all this other stuff. You're just playing around. You can do that. Prior to that, we introduced JShell, a read-eval print loop for Java, which is also aimed at simplifying things instead of having to if you're just experimenting with something, instead of having to stick it in the file and compile it, well, no, you can just now type it into JShell. So yes, this is very much top of mind, making Java more approachable, easier for newcomers, and we expect to continue investing in that area for quite a while.
Okay, so this one follows on exactly on that one. Good to see you again, Mark, by the way. You mentioned the switch expressions and several other linguistic things. Is there anything aside from just better educational materials that Oracle can do to present only current Java to a new learner? Because there's so many different ways to do those things. If we taught them only the best, newest thinking of things, the whole profile of the language would be a lot smaller, a lot less of a conceptual burden to take on. Like, you know what I mean? Like a subset of JavaDoc, for example, or no. Is there anything we could do at the company level for that?
So I'd like to reply to something that maybe you probably didn't mean as the essence of your comment, but you asked, is there anything Oracle can do? To which I will reply, ask not what Oracle can do for Java. Ask what you can do for Java. Or what can the overall ecosystem do for Java? Or Oracle funds Java at a pretty good level, but Oracle cannot do everything. Anyway, end of digression. Are there ways that somebody could come up with a better, some way of generating JavaDoc that was more highly customized, that omitted old things, just, didn't even mention the deprecated stuff? Yeah, totally. Yeah, you could totally do that. I think there's also a lot of value in people who write books and tutorials and whatnot. Focusing on on the new things. So yes, this is absolutely possible. It's work. Somebody's got to do it.
So does OpenJFX on your slide mean that it is back under the OpenJDK umbrella, or is it still developed separately?
So OpenJFX is a project in the OpenJDK community. Yes, it's developed separately from the JDK in the sense that it's not part of the JDK, but it is a project in the OpenJDK community, and it continues to be developed. So I'm not sure. Did I answer your question?
It won't be part of the JDK as such. You have to install it separately.
There are no plans.
It won't be bundled.
There are no plans to merge OpenJFX into OpenJDK. Not everybody needs a fancy graphic system, and those who do know where to find it.
Just another advertisement for some of the tooling. There was a question about JPackage earlier on, but there's another tool, Jlink, that for anyone that has tried JDK 9 or newer, you can actually combine a set of modules and produce your own runtime image. You can actually take the JavaFX modules and put them on the module path for Jlink, and create a runtime image, or use Packager to create an application, or create a package that includes that runtime of those modules. So there's a lot of tooling that avoids the historical need to bundle these things with the JDK.
So a question on Twitter from Klaus. Wait, where did it go? When will illegal access equals deny be made the default? Does everybody know what illegal access deny is? You know, those annoying warnings you get when you run something on a release that came after 8, you know, 9 or later. So right now, the checks on illegal access by the module system are set to warn, which means you get a warning on the first one. You may ask for warnings on the future one. And so all those warnings that you often see, for example, when you start up Maven running on 9 or later, that's all about illegal access errors. That warning today, well, that warning since September 2017 has warned you that sometimes, at some point in the future, illegal access equals deny will be the default. This has been the long-term plan that we launched in 9 to close off access to the internal APIs of the JDK. The current plan is to make illegal access deny be the default in Java 16. In fact, I will shortly be, I hope shortly to post a JEP to be proposing just that.
What is the current plan for PAC 200, considering there are lots of Eclipse libraries floating around?
Sorry, can you hold the mic closer? I couldn't quite.
PAC 200.
Yes.
That's what many old Eclipse libraries use for compactification. And that's going away as far as I understand. When?
It is going away. Or has it gone? It's gone in 14. It was deprecated for removal earlier. It is gone as of 14. The code is open source. If someone needs it, they can get it under the GPL from the JDK repo. It's still in there in the history. Knock yourselves out. We can't maintain everything forever.
I'll just actually link what you said to the question that someone on said earlier on, was asking about cutting loose from the past, and that led to a discussion about deprecating features and removing features and compatibility with older releases. PAC 200 was a tax. Really great idea at the time, wonderful for when bandwidth was an issue and you were downloading applications or web start applications over a slow network. But every single feature that had to touch the class file since has had to deal with PAC 200. So given all the things that are in the technical pipeline, I think the right decision was made to propose a couple of releases back to deprecate and eventually remove this. So it's finally happened. I think something in the Eclipse ecosystem was the only thing that actually showed up on the mailing list during that long period of consultation. So, but I don't think that they were put their hand up to actually to do anything. I don't know what happened there, but I think they were the only ones that came up at the time.
Okay, we can take one last question.
I have recently been exposed to .Net.
By the way, I know you're not wearing a face mask.
One of the things that I found quite nifty with it is that when you package some kind of command line utility, for example, you get a small so-called exe, which is not an exe. It contains bytecodes and will get executed by the virtual machine, etc. But the virtual machine is hidden somewhere up in the operating system, and you don't need to invoke the machine separately. It just is there. Have you considered making something like that, a middle ground between the Graal native image or packaging a full application with JPackage and, well, an so-called executable jar, which isn't really executable?
Okay, so there's a couple of things to mention. I mentioned about Jlink a minute ago to be able to actually combine a set of modules and produce a runtime image. There's an option on that to produce a launcher. It's not a .exe today. It's essentially a script, but it's your program, my app, and that will launch the Java virtual machine for you. Eventually, we need to do something where that actually generates a proper executable. That's just one of these things that someone needs to put time into. But the other thing is you I think asked a question about packager earlier on. So you know that it can actually generate an executable. So it's not the entire runtime and everything statically compiled into one big hundreds of megabytes .exe. It's a small launcher that will launch the VM, but it is a .exe file. That's where we are at the moment.
Okay, I think we are at the end of this session now.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and answering these questions. I hope you'll be around tonight for the party as well, for more private questions, I don't know. And I hope a lot of you are around for a beer or two. And thank you very much.
Thank you.